The following program contains mature subject matter. Listener discretion is advised. Montreal's news talk leader, CJAD 800 presents Passion with sex therapist Dr. Laurie Petito. To reach Dr. Laurie, call 514-790-0991. Star Talk, a free call on Bell Mobility, and 800-491-CJAD. Now, here's Dr. Laurie.
Welcome to Passion, a show about love, sex, and relationships. I'm Dr. Laurie Petito. Tonight, our regular monthly feature called Dating Dilemmas. I'm joined by Frank Kermit. He's a seduction and dating coach. He's actually a dating coach, if you will, of franktalks.com. He's the author of several books on the subject of dating and other subjects as well. In fact, we have one book to give away called The Eye of the Seductress, a workbook for women to learn about the emotional needs of men. So our callers will go into a draw for that. Every month, we do focus on a particular dating issue. And this month, and this was triggered by a caller we had, right, Frank, on our last Dating Dilemma show, about dating after widowhood, after the loss of a partner.
That's right. In the last show that we did, a woman named Mona called in and was talking about getting back into the dating scene after the loss of her longtime husband. And we had talked a little bit about, okay, what are we going to do for next month? That call so stuck with me.
Right.
That I wanted to do a whole show on dating after death.
Yeah, and it is. It's look, the statistics are high in terms of how many people are widowed, and we hear more and more younger widows. So people who are more into, will get back into the saddle probably faster than maybe people who are in their 80s or 90s. Who are widowed, so that's a whole other thing. I do want to share, actually I'll give out the phone numbers, and we'd love to hear from you. If you are widowed or have been widowed, did you date again? Did you remarry? Any particular challenges? Any pieces of advice you'd like to give to others who have been through it? 514-790-0991. You can text your message at 514-800. Star Talk, star 8255 if you're calling from a Bell Mobility cell phone. Now here's a study from the San Diego Widowhood Project. It was a study that looked at 249 widows, 101 widowers, and they completed questionnaires at the 2-month mark, 7-month, 13-month, 19-month, and 25 months after their spouses' deaths. And they were looking for marital and romance status, attitudes toward romance at several time points, and some of the demographic predictors of romance status, etc., etc. By 25 months after the spouse's death, 61% of the men and 19% of women were either remarried or involved in a new romance. So we're talking about 2 years after the death. More than half of the men had become involved, and only, which is interesting, only about 19% of the women. I wonder if that's just availability or what's going on there.
Well, the fact is, there's more widows than widowers.
Right.
One statistic that I read said that the ratio was 2 to 1. For every single widower, there are at least 2 single widows.
Right.
So there's just more people available, and whereas women have more social networks available to them and more circles of friends, older men have less social circles. So they're probably going to have a bigger need to try and meet and form a pair bond again.
Right, and they have more, well, there's more of them to choose from.
Exactly.
Let's go to Sai. Hi, Sai.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. I just have one question, though.
Yeah?
Okay, how can you help a friend who is presently dealing with the loss of her husband?
Okay. That's a very good question for friends. Yes, what do we do? What do people need?
Well, first and foremost, you have to be present with the person. Don't worry about what you're going to say. You don't even have to say anything. There's a need at that moment just to be physically present, to hold their hand. Sometimes the best thing to do is to ask the person who is in mourning, what is it you need? Do you need a shoulder to cry on? Do you just need to talk about it? And don't be too judgmental about anything they say, because in that moment, they may talk about a true deep anger that they're feeling because they feel totally abandoned and very alone. They may be enraged with the deity that they worship in their religion. So rather than worry about what they're saying in the moment, just be there to listen.
I think it's hard. It's a good question because we often feel helpless, and we, when somebody presents with a problem, a dilemma, or they're upset about something, we go into a natural mode of trying to help, trying to fix whatever it is. And so there are some things that are not fixable. There are some things we can't really do anything about, but being there is very important. Thanks so much for your call. It was a great question. All right, bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
514-790-0991. And friends, of course, your social network has, a big role to play in all of this. So let me just share with you more of these results. So by 25 months after the death, 61% of men, 19% of women were either married or involved in a new romance. Women expressed more negative feelings about forming new romantic relationships. Younger age was a predictor of becoming involved in a new romance for women. So the younger they were, the more likely. And higher monthly income and level of education were predictors for men. Greater psychological well-being was highly correlated with being remarried, so it was good for them, or in a new romance 25 months after the spouse's death. So their conclusion is this is very helpful for family, for friends, for therapists to know that dating and remarriage are actually quite common, and they appear to be highly adaptive behaviors among people who are recently bereaved. And I do think some of us maybe tend to make judgment calls on people who get right back into it.
Well, there's that stereotypical image of the unhappy widow who is wearing black and is sitting in a corner alone, doesn't want to socialize, and that's just not the case.
Right.
We're also dealing with a generation that has a longer life expectancy.
Oh, yes.
So if someone, life expectancy at one point was the age of 75 and they were widowed at 73, they figured, well, I have a couple of more years maybe. But the fact is that even someone who's widowed, whether it's a man or a woman at the age of 75, can still live for the next 20, maybe
That's
even
right.
30 years. We have a generation of people who are going to live now past the year of 100.
Is that the prediction?
That's the prediction. You already have a number of people. I think they're called centurions. Is
Yeah,
that? And that number is going to grow more and more. I think they're going to reach about a population of maybe 200,000 by 2020 or 2030. So people
so
are.
we may be in it for the really long haul, you and I.
Anything is possible. Anything is possible.
514-790-0991. You can text us at 514-800. Are you, have you been widowed? Are you widowed? Widower? Did you date again? How long did you wait? Do you think, maybe you haven't been through this, maybe you know somebody who has, what do you think is the waiting period, or is there a waiting period? It's funny, we tend to see a lot of men who jump back into the saddle much, much faster than women do. Sometimes it has to do with availability, but I think it also has to do with need. I think men have, and so there's not male bashing, but men have a need to be connected with somebody. They have a harder time being alone than the women do.
Absolutely. Let's remember that men don't have that social circle around them. They don't have the same social network. And men are not encouraged to express their feelings the way women feel more comfortable doing.
Right. And then maybe they're not encouraged to learn how to do laundry and everything else that they need. So they may want to hook up with somebody quickly so that they don't have to think about all those things themselves. I'm just being practical. I don't know.
Okay, let's call it practical.
It's just a guess. I don't know. Come on, that could motivate some.
Well, I think loneliness is probably the biggest motivator at that point. And yes, there are some men who enjoy being taken care of. There are some women who enjoy being taken care of too.
Yeah.
You said it yourself. Higher education for men, higher income for men helps encourage them to hook up with somebody.
That's right.
Sometimes the men are the ones being chased at that point because there's a level of security
but
with
there's
those
so
men.
few of them, too. They're being chased because there's so few of them. I mean, there are jokes about this in Florida. You know, Florida, that's the capital of like retirees and widows and what have you. And, you know, there's like women waiting on the wings, you know. It's like you lose your partner, they find out they're bringing you chocolate cake, you know, right away. They want to get into your good graces.
It's the absolute reverse of the youth. When young people, they're going after it, and it's the women who are on the receiving end of this sexual attention.
Right.
And when you're dealing with seniors, especially when you're dealing with seniors who have been widowed, it's the men who are the prize at that point because there's so few of them, and if you're lucky enough to land one, well, that means you don't have to spend that time alone.
It's very funny because I have one of my friends, his father's like in his 90s. He must be like 94. Finally got into a home, a nice home, and he from the day he got there, he's had girlfriends, chased by the women like you wouldn't believe. He's 94 years old. It actually gave him a little bit more of a lift to his spirits, and he's so much happier.
Laurie, we all want to be loved. There isn't a human being that doesn't want to be loved in some capacity. And to be on the receiving end of that kind of affection is going to lift anybody's spirits.
You're absolutely right. You're listening to our monthly feature, Dating Dilemmas with Frank Kermit of franktalks.com. We're talking specifically about dating after the death of a partner. And, of course, it's widowhood. It could be in straight relationships or gay relationships. We don't make a distinction. A partner is a partner. And we'd love to hear from you. If you have been widowed, how long did you wait to date again? Did you remarry? Any particular challenges? We'd love to hear your thoughts. 514-790-0991. You're listening to Passion on CJAD 800.
From Loser to Seducer is the story of Frank B. Kermit. This book marks the triumph of a nice guy over most of his inner demons. This includes going from being a loser to managing 5 lovers at the same time, his first Valentine's date with 2 women at the same time, and getting back the one that got away. Want to learn how you can change your life? Buy this book at franktalks.com.
You're listening to Passion with Dr. Laurie Bettito on Montreal's News Talk Leader, CJAD 800.
Dating dilemmas tonight on Passion. We'd love to hear from you, especially if your spouse has died and you have thought about dating or have dated a widow or a widower. Love to hear your thoughts. 514-790-0991. We're talking, it's a dating dilemma show. In other words, what are the challenges faced and what are some of the potential pitfalls? What are some of the, positives? There are positives, but what are some of the issues that people face in this? Hi, Judy. Welcome to the show.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
This happened years ago. I was in my, maybe mid-30s, and this man had been widowed for about 6 months. We were in the same social circle.
Okay.
I just really befriended him just out of empathy for him, sympathy, and he was like a freight train on that track. I mean, it was horrible.
In what sense? What do you mean?
I mean, we dated, let's get married, he scared me away.
Really?
And I knew it was only because he was lonely.
Mm.
He did mention to me, cooking meals is such a hassle, and he needed not only companionship, but somebody to take care of him. And I mean, he came across the totally wrong way. I think had he just slowed down and given time.
Sure.
But he just wanted to rush in there, and I mean, it sure didn't work for me.
No, you ran the other way, that's for sure.
I ran the other way, and I'm glad I did.
Well, that's good advice then. That's good advice for somebody who is looking and not to come on like a freight train.
Well, absolutely, because it really, it's different when you're younger, dating a single man, because
sure.
you figure, even though it's not wise to do that, but he really desires me as a woman, as a life partner.
He doesn't want a mother.
He doesn't want a mother and a maid.
Right.
Only. And that's the way this man made me feel.
Right.
So I thought, no way. All he talked about was all in his inadequacies.
Right.
So it was not for the right reasons.
No.
Although I'm sure he would have been very good to me.
Right, but you wanted to.
I wanted
you
to feel
make
desired
sure, right.
for who I was,
exactly.
and not for what I could just give to him.
That's right.
Absolutely.
I totally agree. Thanks so much for your call, Judy. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye. 514-790-0991. Anything you want to add to that, Frank?
Absolutely. Some people will rush into a relationship after the death of a spouse for the wrong reasons. They just want a replacement spouse. They get very needy, and they're going into the relationship for the wrong reason. He needed to make her feel special. He needed to point out what was unique about her.
Right.
And he wasn't doing that. He was mistaking the idea of, oh, well, I'll just have this person fulfill that role, as opposed to getting to know her as a unique individual and find out where they could connect on their own level.
And what a horrible feeling for Judy, who had to, feel that.
Well,
from him.
That's just not fair for her. The fact is that she went into that relationship thinking she could have her own unique connection with him, but he wasn't capable of it. He was escaping. And I think a lot of people escape through new relationships so they don't have to deal with the grief. But the only way you deal with grief is to just take it head on. The more you try to deny the grief, the more you try to refuse the mourning and try to find escapism, the longer it's going to take for you to get over it.
Right, and it creeps up, And talking to somebody earlier today about grief, who hadn't grieved, 5 years later, it all came to the surface after, one event that triggered all of these emotions and what have you. So, and realizing that, that's been sitting there like a big lump that hasn't been dealt with.
If you don't deal with your grief now, you're going to have to deal with it later, and it's going to manifest itself in ways you can't possibly imagine. It's one of the things that I was studying about this. Right after the death of a partner, your immune system is going to be attacked. This is where people tend to get very sick. And sometimes medically there's nothing wrong with them, but they keep getting sick because they're still grieving.
Right. Well, that's where you come up with the whole expression of somebody, dying of a broken heart. It's quite possible, So the question I think a lot of people ask is how long? How long should someone wait to date again after death?
If you take on the grief head on and deal with it, within, let's say, 6 months, you'll be in a position where you can start dating again. This doesn't mean...
That seems mighty early to me.
But that's with the understanding that you're going to be dealing with your grief. You're going to let out whatever emotion you need to let out. And if it means that you have to act hysterical for a period of time, that's okay. You're doing a good job.
Right.
After 6 months, some people start feeling comfortable with the idea of dating. This doesn't mean that they're over their last partner, but it means that they're starting to move on and they're going to deal with new issues as they come up. The first year is always the hardest because that's the year of firsts.
Right.
The first birthday.
The first of everything. First holidays, first of everything. I would think you'd wait at least a year, for that. But again, we can't judge when this, you could be ready or I would be ready or whoever.
Well, don't forget that part of getting over the death or part of getting over any loss is that you don't do it alone. You need other people to talk to share with. And sometimes that might mean that you start dating and start getting into new relationships, with the understanding that the new relationship you get into is not a means to escape the grief. It's there to help you through it. And the person that you're dating also has to take on a role and understand that you may not be ready for a deep commitment, but that it's healthy for them to share with you while you're going through this process.
Right. And of course, there's so many other issues too that we in the scope of this one show, we probably can't possibly deal with them all. But people who are widowed very young, for example, who have young children, and you've got that to deal with. And there are so many issues that can come up actually. Oh, is this Mona from last month too? Hi, Mona.
Hi, how are you, Dr. Laurie?
Mona, the inspiration for this show.
Yes, hello. Hi, Frank.
Hi, Mona.
I was just calling to let you know I've been listening, and you asked what is a waiting period or what's a good time to wait, and it'll be 2 years next month that I've been widowed, and I started a relationship about 18 months after. So it was 18 months after the death of my husband. And an unexpected relationship. I wasn't out looking for somebody.
Right. You weren't online. You weren't trolling online.
No, I wasn't. I actually met this person in person. We were working together for a bit, and we've been together for 5 months now, and we're very happy. But there are challenges. I had to learn to be comfortable with somebody new. I was married for 25 years.
Getting naked with someone new. That would seem to me like one of the biggest challenges.
Yeah, that was a really big challenge. and you know what? Sometimes it still is, but I have to sort of just get over my fears, and I know he loves me and he accepts me for the way I am.
Right.
And but it is difficult. And Frank was saying about grieving and getting it over and done with sooner than later. And unfortunately for me, that didn't happen. And I'm actually going through a grieving process in the last 2 or 3 months, which I hadn't expected.
Do you think it was triggered by this relationship?
No, actually, it wasn't. It was triggered by friends and family telling me that yes, it was triggered by this relationship and by friends and family telling me how much happier I've been than they can remember for a long, long time.
Right.
And it's got me thinking, and I've had to face some facts and responsibilities, and that
that maybe your initial relationship wasn't all rosy.
No, exactly. It wasn't all rosy, and but it wasn't all my husband's fault. It was partly my fault too. We had communication issues,
right?
Which I don't have communication issues in my new relationship, and because I've learned.
Well, that's the key, is you learned, and you've taken responsibility, which is amazing.
Yes, yeah. and it's really felt nice to have taken that responsibility, for my own actions in my marriage, and I've been seeing a counselor as well.
Good.
And that has helped. And she's, not only did I not grieve my husband, I did grieve my husband, but not as much as I should have. But she said I also hadn't grieved my mother passing away.
Right. It brought all the grief, and that's what grief tends to do. You grieve everybody and everything that you haven't all that time. Mona, thanks for calling, and thanks for inspiring us to do this topic on this month's dating dilemma. We'd love to hear from you too. 514-790-0991. You're listening to Dating Dilemmas with my co-host here, Frank Kermit of franktalks.com.
From Loser to Seducer is the story of Frank B. Kermit. This book marks the triumph of a nice guy over most of his inner demons. This includes going from being a loser to managing 5 lovers at the same time, his first Valentine's date with 2 women at the same time, and getting back the one that got away. Want to learn how you can change your life? Buy this book at franktalks.com.
This is Passion with Dr. Laurie Bettito on Montreal's News Talk Leader, CJAD 800.
Welcome to our monthly feature, Dating Dilemmas. Frank Kermit is my guest tonight. He's a dating coach. Actually, he's my guest every night we do Dating Dilemmas. And the lines are open for you. Tonight we picked another topic to discuss, another challenge, and that is widowhood, or dating after the loss of a partner. Are you widowed? Did you date again? How long did you wait? What were the particular challenges, if any at all? Are you worried about dating? What if it's your parents or a parent that is widowed, and how do you deal with that? Because I know this, I hear a lot. Adult kids who have major issues when their parent starts to date again. They're feeling it as if it's a betrayal somehow.
Absolutely, especially if the parent died when the child was still in adolescence. During the life development of an adolescent, there's that period where all adolescents feel that they're invincible. And when they have a parent who dies during that time frame, that type of reality can be such a traumatic challenge to the idea that, well, I feel invincible, but I'm really not.
Right. But I'm thinking more I was thinking of adult children. So, you're 40 or 50 years old, and your mother passes on, and your father is there, and he starts dating, immediately. And you're still grieving as the child, and you have to kind of watch this go on. And those are particularly challenging situations.
Absolutely, but we have to get to the heart of why they're really feeling anger. Is it that they haven't dealt with their own grief and now they're feeling like they're losing their living parent to someone else?
Maybe.
Could it be the fact that they haven't gotten over their grieving of the parent who's died, and since they haven't really dealt with it, anything that comes up that should just maybe give them a little concern, well, I just want to make sure that my dad is now dating someone who's going to be good to him, they blow it out of proportion. Because they're just still so angry. That initial loss was never dealt with, so even the most insignificant loss that comes up later in life brings back all those negative emotions.
Right. But I've also, heard of situations, and quite a few of them, where the adult children were really upset because, for example, and this usually it was a woman coming into the life of their father, would come in rather soon after, and would kind of move right in, move into and adopt and take on all of their mother's things. And I knew one situation where they were asking for, the new woman in the life was asking for the ex-wife's jewelry and ex-wife's this and and I guess the adult child watching this other woman take over her mom's household using her good china that the mom picked out and doing this or doing that is very difficult for a lot of people.
Absolutely. If you are the person who is dating a widow or a widower, you still have to be respectful of the fact that the possessions that belonged to the dead spouse really isn't something that you should be getting your hands on. If anything, that I personally feel should go to the children immediately to say, these are the mementos of your dead parent. So why don't you come in and grab them, and we'll make do with what we can have and what we can build ourselves.
Right.
This is, I feel, a form of disrespect.
Right.
If I was dating a woman who was a widow, and I have actually, I never thought about, well, can I borrow your dead husband's bathrobe or anything like that. I just didn't. That was a line I wouldn't cross.
Right.
So I think there's a certain level of respect there that needs to be adhered to.
Right. Okay, yes. And I want to talk about the differences between men and women, because we do find that men could get involved very quickly after the death of a spouse, within months. I can't tell you how many stories I've heard of 2 months, 3 months, 4 months down the line. They're right back in it and in a serious relationship. So,
well, these men are lonely.
Right.
They don't have the same social circle networks that'll help keep them active, that'll allow them to connect. In fact, if they start sharing their emotions with how lonely and how miserable they are, they might lose a sense of self. They might feel less masculine for doing so. So somebody comes along and is able to offer them some form of affection, some form of escape. Sometimes just that sense of, wow, somebody loves me right now, and I'm feeling so alone and isolated without that love. That is very powerful, and it's intoxicating for some people.
Right. But the grieving process is the same. Just, is it shortened for men? Is it something that is in denial more? Or just different?
Having a new relationship does not shorten the grieving process. You still have to go through the grieving. It's not about what the new relationship offers you. It's about grieving the loss of the previous relationship. And that still has to be respected, and that still has to be processed for the person, even if they're dating multiple people at the same time. That's the thing about grief and mourning. You still have to go through the process whether or not you're dating anybody else.
Right. It's going to come up to bite you in the butt if you don't anyway.
Exactly.
And we just said, we alluded to it earlier on about you may avoid grieving the loss of this particular thing, but when another loss comes up, you grieve them all together.
Exactly.
And it just hits you that much harder. Let's hear from Greta. Hi, Greta. Hello, Greta. Do we have Greta?
Hear me?
Yes, hi, Greta.
Hi, I've been doing public relations for monuments for over 20 years. And so I've been in touch with
widows and widowers and their stories. And you know, what's good for one is not for another. And
Right.
we really can't say. You know, also it depends upon your religion too. If you believe in certain things, you keep it for a year, or
Right.
you keep it for whatever you want. I know some women who lost a husband, and just 2 months after, they got into another relationship.
Right.
I mean, you know, everyone has their own thing. I'm a widow for 22 years, and when I died, my only big problem was I looked 20 years younger than what I was, and I had to promise my sons that I wouldn't date guys younger than they were.
Okay.
And the first guy that asked me to go out, I said to him, "How old are you?" And he told me, I said, "I can't go out with you." But there's all kinds of problems,
Right.
you know, so what's good for one is not good for another. It just depends how you feel, and if it makes you feel good, do it.
That's right, and that's a good indicator. See how it makes you feel, because if going on a date makes you feel like crap and makes you
Forget
feel
about
all
it.
guilty,
That's right.
yeah, then it's
But if
you're
you
not
feel-
ready.
I mean, what else is there in life? I mean, how long is happiness?
Right. How long do we have to
You know.
to grab that?
Right.
Right. Yep.
I love you.
Thank you, and I appreciate your call, Greta.
Okay,
Okay.
dear.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Stefan joins us. Hi, Stefan.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Yeah, I lost my wife when I was 39.
Oh, that's
And-
young.
Yeah, and we were together for 12 years. As far as the grieving process, I mean, most of the people that I spoke with, you know, I was on a website called WidowNet, and it was a really good outlet as far as talking to other people that were going through the same things you were going through, because there's so many emotions that you run into that you have no idea.
They're so
what's
new to
going
you,
on.
right?
I mean, I was having like blackouts and stuff like that. I mean, it was just like you don't know what's going on physiologically
Right.
and mentally, and there's so many different things, and you know, 6 months is way too soon. I mean, that's not to say I wasn't with someone before within 6 months. I was.
Okay, but nothing serious is what you're saying.
No, not even close.
Right.
I mean, you're not capable. But there was something, I'm sure you've heard of this thing called skin hunger.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, you know, when you've been with somebody, you're lying in bed with somebody for 12 years.
You crave that.
You crave that bodily contact.
Yeah.
And that intimacy. And, you know, that loneliness that you feel, and there's such a huge void within you that needs to be filled. And so, I dated, you know, in a sense where I hate to say it, I was, I don't know, not a slut, but, you know, I went out and did the singles thing after a certain period of time.
Right.
Because I needed that contact.
And how long until you got into a more serious relationship?
It was well over a year and a half. And even then, I don't think I was ready.
Okay.
But I reconnected with somebody that I knew from college, and we were always attracted to one another. But I really wasn't ready, you know. 2-3 years. I found the second year was harder than the first year.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah. Well, because the first year you're numbed.
Right.
And I think it all depends on when it happens. Like I lost Donna when it was in August, well, July 31st.
Mm-hmm.
Our wedding anniversary is September 1st. Her
Right.
birthday's right after that. Then Christmas. You know what I mean?
Right.
And you're still reeling. So those dates come so quick.
Right.
That you really don't have a time. You haven't gone through anything yet. And so the second time around, it actually
It hit
for
harder.
a lot of people
right.
that it actually hit too harder the second
Right.
time around. That's what I felt, and a lot of people that I've spoken with felt the same way. That the second anniversaries were harder than the first.
Well, Stefan, we appreciate very much you sharing that with us. We'd love to give you one of Frank's book. It's called The Eye of the Seductress. It's actually about the emotional needs of men. So although it's written it's not just written for women, but it's something that I think could help you too. Would you like it?
Well, thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate that.
All right.
Because I do agree with, you know, what you said about having that social network.
Right.
It's so different because guys, you have to be strong. I can't cry on my buddy's shoulder.
Right.
You just don't. We're women. Right. The women are a lot more emotionally connected and in tune with themselves, and they have that outlet. And I think for men, it's so much more difficult. Yeah. And you are basically alone for the most part.
You know what? I agree. Stefan, thanks so much. Don't go away. We're going to put you on hold, and Mike's going to take all your information so we can leave the book here for you at CJAD, okay?
Well, thank you very much.
All right. Thanks for calling. Okay. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Bye.
There's so many stories, and they really are quite a few challenges.
So many heartbreaking
stories, yeah.
What happened to Stefan in his first year, where he was getting dizzy and blacking out and becoming forgetful, very common elements when you're dealing with grief. And the second year is more lonely than the first, because people tend to have to get on with their own lives, and they're going to be there for you, and they'll be there to support you during that first year. But by that second year, there's that unrealistic expectation that, well, okay, it's been a year, you can handle it from here. And we're already a touch-starved society. Right. That someone who's just gotten through this incredible loss and is still mourning and is not ready necessarily to get out there and reconnect with the world, it's already so touch-starved that he's going to feel the hunger and just missing the warm body next to him. Which is, I think
Stefan explained it very well, is you can turn to other bodies, not necessarily other emotional relationships, but just, have the bodies there. Their meaning, it has very little meaning, but at least it fulfills that one part.
Well, there's a difference between sex and love.
Right.
And sometimes fulfilling the sexual need does not necessarily fulfill the deeper emotional needs.
Right. So, I'd love to talk about a particular challenge that I have certainly heard, talked to people about, and that's the sexual challenges, especially safe sex, like negotiating, women and men who don't know how to approach the subject. And frankly, Frank, there are studies showing that there's a huge increase in STDs in the elderly population.
Absolutely. When you've been with the same person for so many years, you develop a trust, you develop a commonality, and you stop using safe sex.
Well, you don't need to. You don't need to use protection with the partner you've been with for 30 years.
Because you're monogamous, there's no chance of pregnancy, and so going bareback starts becoming the norm.
Sure.
Now, what happens when you are a widow and you want to get back into the dating world, and you're not even comfortable approaching the subject of condoms? Because
and maybe you've never seen a condom because you got married young and whatever. You were on the pill and you've never had to use a condom, and suddenly, who's talking to you about this stuff?
Exactly, and it can be very embarrassing because at this point you're already lost so much that trying to be open about something that could be this private, and we're dealing with people who grew up in a time where people didn't talk about sex.
Yeah, of course not, right.
What we're doing right now would have been considered very, very taboo. We would have gotten into deep trouble.
I have news for you. It's still a little bit taboo, but we just don't get in trouble for it. Because we can say whatever we want.
Oh, we still get in trouble for it. It's the dirty looks we get now.
I guess it's a little bit different. Let's take a short break and come back to our Dating Dilemmas program once a month. Frank Kermit joins us of franktalks.com to share his expertise on dating challenges. And tonight's challenge, we're talking about dating after the death of a partner. We'd love to have your input on the show as well at 514-790-0991. You can also feel free to text us. It's a 25-cent charge at 514-800. I'm Dr. Laurie Bettito, and you're listening to Passion.
From Loser to Seducer is the story of Frank B. Kermit. This book marks the triumph of a nice guy over most of his inner demons. This includes going from being a loser to managing 5 lovers at the same time, his first Valentine's date with 2 women at the same time, and getting back the one that got away. Want to learn how you can change your life? Buy this book at franktalks.com.
You're listening to Passion with Dr. Laurie Bettito on Montreal's News Talk Leader, CJAD 800.
I'm Mr. Lonely. I have nobody.
Dating Dilemmas tonight on on Passion. Frank Kermit's in the studio. We're talking about dating after the death of a partner. So we've been talking about the specific challenges surrounding safe sex. I know that I know a couple of adult children, like in my age group in their 40s, who are having the safe sex conversation with their parents, who are who are doing the sex education thing with their parents. I don't know how many are all that comfortable doing it, but nonetheless, I have heard a few who are doing it, and I think it's important. I think, you know what? It is a good time to be talking to them about this.
It's always a good time to talk about safe sex. We're talking about keeping people safe, regardless of their age. And if people are going to start socializing again, if they're going to start dating again, and they haven't had to think about it previously, older or not, they need to know about safe sex and how to protect themselves.
Right.
And they also have to be ready to walk away from a situation that could be very risky for them, even if it means that they lose the person that they're dating. So that if someone is pressuring them saying, well, you know, I really don't feel comfortable using condoms, we're both older, there's no chance of pregnancy, why worry about it? We're both clean, right? And as you said, the number of STDs growing amongst senior citizens.
It's very high.
Exactly.
Yeah. But part of it is negotiating this. Like, we need to teach older people how to handle it. Like, okay, say it, you know, knowing about safe sex is one thing. Handling it in the situation is another. For example, a 75-year-old woman might not, who grew up in a generation where women did not take control of sexuality, may feel very uncomfortable carrying condoms in her purse. May have the old thinking of, what is he going to think of me? That I'm some floozy because I have the condoms in my purse?
It's a fear of hurting their reputation, and there are so many ties to a woman's upbringing and childhood that brings up these issues. This is why not every woman who becomes a widow can start dating again. Depending on a culture, you might have some cultures that state that if you're a widow, regardless of what age you become a widow, you never remarry. Out of respect for your dead husband, out of respect for your children.
And you wear black for the rest of your life.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, we can't, you know, again, we can't judge people. People have to do what's comfortable for them, because people who grow up in those environments will not be comfortable dating again, even if they wanted to. There's too many social constraints that kind of hold them back. So coming up, we'll talk a little more about some specific challenges that a person facing widowhood and dating again will face, and we'll give you a few tips coming up right here on Dating Dilemmas with Frank Kermit.
From Loser to Seducer is the story of Frank B. Kermit. This book marks the triumph of a nice guy over most of his inner demons. This includes going from being a loser to managing 5 lovers at the same time, his first Valentine's date with 2 women at the same time, and getting back the one that got away. Want to learn how you can change your life? Buy this book at franktalks.com.
This is Passion with Dr. Laurie Bettito on Montreal's news talk leader, CJAD 800.
Last chance to call in. Dating Dilemmas once a month. Frank Kermit joins us. He's a dating coach, and he's the author of several books. One of them that we're giving away tonight, The Eye of the Seductress, a workbook for women to learn about the emotional needs of men. You can find out more on his website if you want to order books or what have you at franktalks.com. Tonight, the specific dating challenge that we're talking about is dating after the death of a partner. So if you've been down that painful road, I'm sure you have faced some challenges, and one of the challenges we've been talking about, of course, is negotiating safe sex. It's not always something that's easy to do, and I think you have to have that going in. You have to think about it. At the very least, start thinking about it and taking charge and taking responsibility for your own safety. Don't go in assuming that everybody's clean. No, it could very well be that the person you're having sex with has had several other experiences, sexual experiences, unprotected, maybe with prostitutes. Who knows? But you can't just go on somebody's word.
The rule is, if you're not used to talking about safe sex and you're starting to date again after the death of a spouse, the rule to employ is that you must have that conversation before it ever gets into the bedroom.
Yeah, that's a given. Absolutely. These are things that you got to learn how to talk about.
So when you're sitting in the living room, having a drink, talking casually, bring it up and say, there's something that's been on my mind that we really do need to talk about. And yes, it may seem uncomfortable at first. You'll get more used to it as you continue to rebuild your social life, because this is not something that's going to go away. You need to get comfortable with it because it's a new element of your life that you have to adapt to.
Right. What are, can we talk about guilt for a minute? Because I think that's one of the challenges that some people face.
Negative emotions, especially the emotion of guilt, is something that most widows and widowers feel when they start to date again. And one of the key reasons is this. When they are in a position of either asking someone out on a date or being asked out on a date, sometimes that act is what truly solidifies that their spouse is dead and that that part of their life is over.
Right.
And so when the person is being asked out, that's when they really have to contemplate, wow, I just got asked out, but wait a minute, I'm not married anymore. Sometimes it's that event that makes the death feel very real.
Right.
And so all of a sudden these guilt feelings come up because it almost feels like you're cheating on someone who's not there.
Right.
Marriage ends in one of only two ways: divorce and death. And it's easier to start dating after a divorce because there's something about that other person still being alive. You can reconnect. Some people will do it out of revenge because they're angry.
Exactly, and there's more anger. It's a whole different set of emotions. Although sometimes there's just as much grief as there is in a death in a different way. But
it's a different kind of loss and grief.
Yeah.
But when you're dealing with a widow or a widower, there's that pain because they never stopped loving.
Right,
their partner.
Exactly. It's a very different kind of pain. We just got a text message, and it's a joke, so we'll read it. We can end on a light note. An elderly man in a residence puts a sign on his door, "Sex for money." An elderly woman knocks on the door and asks how much. The elderly man replies, $1 in bed, 25 cents on the floor. She hands him $1 and says, 4 times on the floor, please. At least we can end on a chuckle.
Oh, were we all that viral?
That's it, Frank. Thanks so much for taking part in the program. Very much appreciated, as usual. We'll catch you again in October.
Laurie, it's been great as always. I look forward to coming back again.
I want to let our listeners in on something. A new book in the works. We want to hear your wildest sexual experiences. You may be chosen to appear to be in print in the book. Just send your stories to sexstories@drlaurie.com. Sexstories@drlaurie.com. Your confidentiality will be protected. Promise you on that. News is next, coming up, and then we've got Joey Elias and the Comedy Show. Big thank you, Mike Babbins, for keeping us on track. Have a great rest of the night, and don't forget, life is short, so make sure you do take the time to smell those flowers and indulge your passions.
Loser to Seducer is the story of Frank B. Kermit. This book marks the triumph of a nice guy over most of his inner demons. This includes going from being a loser to managing 5 lovers at the same time, his first Valentine's date with 2 women at the same time, and getting back the one that got away. Want to learn how you can change your life? Buy this book at franktalks.com.